Hello Summoners and welcome back to another Pro Guides video. My name is Nathan Ing and we're going to be going over the beginner's guide for the mid lane for Season 12. Despite the name, this isn't really a guide just for new players. Maybe you need to catch up after a preseason break, or you just want to make sure that you have all the basics down so you can get your season off to a good start. Wherever you stand, you're guaranteed to learn something new from this video. Also, before we get started, I do want to also just take a minute to talk to you guys about ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros to really help you understand how to play the right way. And if you want a more personalized experience, we have coaches available 24/7 ready to help you become the best. Our coaches are top tier players that now have spent years climbing the solo queue ladder to get where they are now, and they're ready to share everything that they've learned with you. The new season is just around the corner, so if you're serious about really making Season 12 this season that you finally reach your goals, then you should really consider heading over to our site. The link for that is down in the description box below. Now let's get started. So the first thing that we need to look at is what's new this season and how those things may affect the mid lane. Since the preseason is a downtime where ranked games don't really matter nearly as much as the rest of the year, it's a time where Riot implements all their new crazy ideas and systems to the game. For example, last year brought us the item system revamp, which was a huge change. Not only did Riot remove and rework a lot of the old items while adding in the new ones, but they also introduced a new mythic class. This year, the biggest change that we saw was the addition of the new Chemtech and Hextech Dragon. These changes aren't the type to directly affect the meta in any way, since dragon spawns are purely RNG, but they definitely spice things up a little bit, which is much more than I could say about my love life. Anyway, the Hextech Dragon in particular allows for some interesting plays. When that dragon is chosen to be Dragon Soul, the Elemental Rift gives Hex Gates that allow you to traverse the map. This can be used to make it from one side of the map's blue buff to right behind the other side's red buff. While pretty niche, this can affect your gameplay as certain mid lane champions, burst mages, and assassins in particular can really utilize this. Instead of it being mandatory to have your flash up to reach squishy backliners, you may be able to use the Hex Gates to find a flank when both teams are dancing around Baron or Dragon. Aside from those dragons, the other big change that we've seen is the addition of some new items to play with. New things in League are generally pretty strong at first and are usually fine-tuned down to an acceptable level. But more so than any other item that Riot has ever put into the game, Crown of the Shattered Queen is way overtuned. The issue with mages as a whole last season is that they were too susceptible to being one-shot by assassins and bruisers that dominated the meta. You would basically have to build full defensive items to survive, but then you just didn't do any damage. As a result, most mages just sucked, and a few that were viable were just burst mages that could flash combo in an instant like Annie. To fix that, Riot added Crown to give a defensive option for mage players, but they went way overboard with it. 75% damage reduction for 1.5 seconds is absurd, and makes it impossible to kill a mage without chain CCing them. Then there's the new Cosmic Drive, which gives a budget ghost for the entirety of a teamfight once you proc it. Between the damage reduction and movement speed from these two items, mages are incredibly safe in teamfights, making them consistent carries. The other big new item for mid lane is Axiom Mark. Giving an item a passive that refunds your old cooldowns means that once you get snowballing on an AD assassin, you can keep that snowball rolling hard. All in all, these new items really give a lot more solo carrying potential to mid lane this season. That's why we've seen such a huge spike in win rates of hard scaling AP champions like Victor and Kassadin, as well as assassins that can roam and be proactive around the map, like Kiana and Talon. Even with all the meta analysis that we do, it can be hard to determine what the very best pick in the game is at a given time. Sometimes we like a little bit of extra help to sort things out, and that brings us to today's question of the day. What champion do you think is the most OP champion across all roles so far in this season? I definitely think Kassadin was my #1 pick early, but since he was nerfed this patch, it's up in the air for me, so let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Okay, so now we've covered what's new in Season 12, let's talk about some mid lane basics. Some of you more experienced players may think that you don't really need to hear what I have to say here, but even players in the upper elos get sloppy and start to lack in this department. Solid fundamentals are just as important, if not more important, than some good mechanics. The first most key part of the game of League of Legends is establishing your plan for the early laning phase. Many players across all ranks queue up for ranked, ready to win some LP, and then immediately turn off their brains for laning phase. They just mindlessly trade anytime their opponent is in range, with no thought about managing the wave. They may come out on top in terms of HP, but in reality, they mess up their wave, die to a gank, and then blame their jungler. I know we love blaming our junglers, but sometimes we're responsible for what happened. So how do you establish a plan? There's a lot to weigh in here. You have to think not only of your specific 1v1 matchup, but also how the junglers may play into it. Let's say that you're playing a really strong early game champion that can bully most matchups, like Pantheon. In a vacuum, it would be easy to run your opponent over and just kill them, or at least shove them out of lane. But if the enemy jungler is somewhat aggressive early game, like Lee Sin or Elise, then there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be ready for that, and they'll be nearby ready to gank you as soon as you commit to the fight. Now, if your own jungler has just as much early game presence, then you're fine to play aggressively as long as they can back you up. But if you end up with somebody more farm heavy like Yi or Shyvana, you have to completely adapt your playstyle. But that doesn't mean you're conceding an otherwise easy win, you're just playing to win lane in a different way. Instead of the perma aggro 24/7 style that you may be used to on Pantheon, maybe you'll just let the wave come to your side and build up a freeze. Then you'll be able to trade on your opponent when they're forced to move up for a CS without really having to overextend and die to a gank. You may not rack up as many kills, so you may not seem like you're winning quite as hard as you normally would, but you'll still build up a huge CS lead and hopefully an XP lead. This is a nice consistent way to win the lane. Once you have that plan to pull the wave, then freeze it in front of your turret, you constantly tell yourself to stick to it. I've seen plenty of instances where somebody has a perfect freeze but then gets greedy, goes for a trade, and then ruins it all. Then their opponent ends up with the freeze, and everything they worked so hard for goes down the drain. Aside from freezing, there is one other tactic that you can use when your jungler doesn't really have that much early presence, but you also want to use an OP early game champion to generate a lead. If you can't play for your own lane, you can just shove out the minion wave and then look to roam. This is obviously going to be limited by your champion's wave clear versus your opponent's, but most of the time, if you're a strong bully, your opponents will be too scared to try to clear waves fast. They generally prefer to let the wave come to them so they can safely farm. This may keep them alive, but it also gives you plenty of time to help your jungler on an invade or go for a stroll to bot lane. And everybody knows how easy it is to tilt bot laners, so if you're able to pull this off, you may just have gifted a free win when your opponent rage quits after a dive or two. To really nail these different game plans down, you're going to need to put in a lot of time and effort to learn how your champion works. Every champion has different power spikes that they want to play around. For example, Qiyana is able to fight with her jungler in 2v2s as early as level 3, but would definitely rather wait for an ulti to go for a bot lane dive. But a mage like Viktor, while lane dominant, may not ever want to leave mid lane until having a full item or even two. Then you have to take into account who you're playing against. An enemy mid laner with low wave clear like Hasidon can't really punish early roams well. But if it's Yasuo, he may be able to shove in a wave, denying you the CS and then taking a play for himself. That's just some good examples, but I think you get the idea. It's going to take a lot of games to understand how to play around both you and your opponent's strengths game to game. But if you want a bit more of a shortcut to success, you know our coaches at ProGuides are more willing to help. I mean, come on, they're available around the clock, so it's never really a bad time to come try one out. Whether it's specific matchup help or just some general tips in the mid lane, I promise you that there's at least one that specializes in exactly what you're looking for. All you have to do is click on the link in the description. Okay, so we talked about having a plan for playing lane, but everyone knows that League is dynamic and not static. Everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. If you see that a play that you 100% know is going to work out, it's okay to break your plan for a free kill. But what you need to avoid is taking part in what we call high variance plays. Basically, stay away from plays that aren't simple, easy to execute, and in your control. This is another thing that you just sort of have to play by ear, since there's no hard set rules on what is and what isn't a high variance play. But for example, let's say that your jungler is spam pinging that he wants to invade a respawning buff or contest Scuttle Crab. If you don't have absolute lane priority in lane, and the other enemy laners are able to react to this play, you could just /mute all. I know this sounds horrible, but you don't want to throw a game. Instead of throwing it all away for just such a small lead, just ping your jungler off the play and keep farming mid. If they don't listen and they die, well, that's on them and not on you. Diving towers can also be a high variance play, depending on champions that are involved. If you're playing Annie and your jungler is playing Xin Zhao, then it's really easy enough to pull off. But if you're both playing skill shot champions like Irelia and Nidalee, where landing certain abilities is key to actually getting kills, forcing dives can easily end in 2 kills for your opponent. Then you're both spending the rest of the game bickering with each other. Just like in real life, think before you act in game, rather than just automatically going for a play because your teammate tells you to. Another super key skill for laning is knowing when to reset. This one may seem obvious, but it's something that you constantly see people fall victim to. They haven't gone back to base yet, so they're sitting on quite a lot of gold. They could go back right now and get Lost Chapter, but their opponent is shoving in waves constantly, so they don't want to back out yet. They eventually run out of mana and then just have to resort to just last hitting minions under tower. When the wave isn't under tower, they can't move up at all, so they get denied a minion here and there. But still, they don't want to reset, because the whole wave will die to tower. Then they get stuck in this loop, and then their opponent just ends up building a bigger and bigger CS lead. Avoiding this trap is pretty easy. Just stick to resetting on certain power spikes as soon as you get them. If you're a mage, that generally means that as soon as you have 1300 gold, you're immediately going to go back for Lost Chapter. It may feel bad to watch a wave die to tower, but in the long run, you end up securing so much more gold for yourself once you have all this mana sustained. Anyway, that wraps up our video for our beginner's guide to mid lane for Season 12. If you guys have any tips as well, please leave them in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure you sub so you never miss out on our meta guides or any content like this. Remember, let us know what champion has been the most OP this preseason in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord. You can go ahead and discuss the league further or just hang out and be part of the community and see when I stream, which is at twitch.tv/Nathan_ing. We'll see you guys there. If not, no worries, you're dead to me. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.